Boom, I'm in the room. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're watching or listening from. Welcome to Everyday Conversations regarding mental health. Now, you're here because there's nothing on the telly. And I'm coming to you live from the old Heale Manor, and I'm your host, Lord Heale. Now, wrong button. I should have looked. That was the wrong button. Anyway, you know what the show's all about. It's all about mental well-being, trying to take the stigma out of mental health and bring it into an everyday conversation. So, I'm still looking for guests. I have a guest on this evening. They're in the wings. They're in the green room. They're waiting to dive in. So, if you want to come on the show, give us a shout and we'll arrange it. But in the meantime, this evening, what we're going to look at is going to pick up on the theme that we've been running with recently is veteran suicide and support for it, and finding tips and tricks to help people, to let them know that they're not alone out there. So without too much further ado, let me bring in my guest. Here we go. Sherry, welcome.
Hi, how are you, Tim? Thanks for having me.
You are most welcome. Now, you've got quite a bit of a story to tell.
Just
Being
just a bit of one.
being a right honourable and all the rest of it, inaugurated by Congress. President had a hand in it, did he?
Just a few things. So a little bit about me,
Yeah,
Tim, as you asked.
let's give you the
So,
platform. It's all yours.
yeah, thank you. So I am Sherry Mason. My official title, from if we want to talk about Lord Heal here, my official title is the Honorable Cheryl Mason, and that comes from my time as the chairman, the first woman and military spouse to serve as the presidentially appointed Senate confirmed chairman of the Board of Veterans Appeals at the United States Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington, D.C. And I served in that position for 5 years. So, and prior to that, I also served as a judge and an attorney in the Department of Veterans Affairs. But my story starts a little bit before that. When I was a young girl, my father, a World War II veteran, died by suicide when I was 4 years old. And so I am a suicide loss survivor. And that impact to my world as a young girl really changed how I viewed the world. It changed the importance of people and relationships and the impact, but also it was the veteran community that came alongside and supported my mother and myself through that process. And then, I went to college and met and married an Air Force officer, and I became a military spouse. And so as a military spouse, serving all around the country and actually in Europe, I got to meet so many different people, both in the United States and in Germany. And, both the military and the veteran families struggle sometimes with transition and a lot of things. And I think one of the things I learned along my journey is, telling your story and talking about those challenges is really important.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to bring with this particular platform that we're on, is to let people know that are struggling, that there is help out there. There is always help. It,
Yes.
that song in MASH, "Suicide is Painless." Well, it ain't. It just isn't. It's Suicide has an impact on so many different people. Not just the person that's taken their own life or attempted to, but their family and their friends and so many other people that it affects. And that's what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to make it, give people a reason to be able to go to a close friend, go to a doctor, go to somebody just to say, I'm struggling and I'm thinking about doing something. Can you help? And that's what we're trying to do. You're not alone. So many people have that same thought. And I'm sure you've seen it in your work life career.
I have, not only did I lose my father, but my brother died by suicide 2 weeks before I left for college, and he left behind a young family. So the impact to our family was significant, not only with the loss of my father, but then the loss of my brother. And so what we learned as a family from that was that we had to talk about it and we had to share our challenges and our concerns, because when you experience suicide in your family, what a lot of people don't realize, but the studies do show us now, is that you're at higher risk. And so that's why it's even more important to talk about the impact and what you're going through and your challenges and share that. And so I took those lessons forward with me into life and into my world. And when my husband and I were raising our two children outside the Washington D.C. area, the high school that they went to, they experienced 6 teenage suicides over a period of about 7 years. And it was extremely difficult for the community, and extremely hard for people to understand what was happening and why. And so there was a lot of discussion about it. My kids grew up understanding their history of their grandfather and their uncle, and so we always talked about the challenges. But what we found talking to their friends and family members was some families didn't talk about those challenges, and it's hard to say, I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time. But these days there's so many people out there who will just listen. And sometimes that's just what you need, is somebody to listen and say, look, I know you're in a hard place, and I'm here, but let me help you find the right connection. And as a judge and as the chairman at the Board of Veterans Appeals in DC, we held hearings with veterans. And so many times I would have a veteran across from me who was struggling with suicide issues. And, when I asked them, are you thinking about suicide? Many times they were surprised that I asked the question, because most people don't. And when you do ask the question, it lets them know that you care about them and you're concerned about them. And when I would ask that question, it opened a door and allowed me to provide them support and get them support. And I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding that there's people out here, and this podcast is absolutely vital for this, because it's so important that people understand that, one, the impact of suicide in families is devastating, can be devastating. But at the same time, there's people there, and we are here to listen and help.
Yeah, I harp on about this all the time. I'm part of several veterans groups in this area. I mean, we're blessed really in the south of England where I live, in the Solent area, particularly in Gosport and Fareham. We have the highest concentration of veterans in the UK. And the hospitals around here are geared up towards veterans and assisting veterans. We have quite a few charities. In fact, I was at one today, at a drop-in over at the Veterans Outreach Support, which lays on a drop-in centre once a month, the first Wednesday of the month, and they get all the different agencies down there that are there to help veterans, which is really good. So I popped along to that today, and before I went to that one, I was at another group for veterans, where they give us a cup of tea and a cake and a chat. It's called Buns and Banter, and that and and that had, I think there was 20 odd of us there today. We've got another one tomorrow afternoon that we go to regularly, and so there's lots of veterans around that will listen, and lots of
Yeah.
veterans that have been in similar situations themselves. You
That's,
don't have to be alone.
right. That's one of the things the Department of Veterans Affairs does in the United States, along with the Department of Defense, and also in the military and veteran communities. We have quite a few organizations who are there to support. We call them veteran service organizations, and then there's others organizations who are there to support. We have buddy check-ins. Some of the organizations do that, where they
Yeah,
check in. We, as you know, and I'm sure you all do the same thing. It sounds like that's exactly what you do. Is those check-ins, is being there for people and saying, "Hey, I'm here for you. Call me if you need
yeah,
me." Or and with when service members transition, well, any transition is hard, but service members transitioning is very difficult, and it's not just the service member; it's the family. And
yeah.
so when the family is supported and the service member is supported, that and they know where to go and how to seek help, that helps the process, because transition it's not easy, and it's not one and done. It's continual.
Mm. I mean, when leaving the military, when I left the first time, I struggled, really struggled with getting back into a civilian work life, and it's the reason I came back into the military. I couldn't
Mhm.
hack it anymore. Civilians don't have the same work ethic. They don't have the same loyalty and dedication to the job, about getting a job done, that the military has, and it's difficult working alongside people that just treat it as a job, 9 to 5. They won't do any overtime to get a job finished. It'll wait till tomorrow. I found that difficult to cope with. Fortunately, I managed to get back into the military. I did a double career. I ended up doing 44 years instead of 22. And I retired at 60, uh, with a reasonably decent pension, so I don't have to go out to work. I would struggle going back into civilian street to work, that's for sure. But going down those dark times, I realised, because of the work I did as a welfare officer in my last 8 years, I realised that there was something not right with myself, and I was drinking a lot. I was thinking, I'm in a spiral. I need to go and do something about it. Recognising that is the first step in the journey to being, or getting help. So
Mhm.
I managed to get an appointment to see my doctor. First thing he did was recommend putting me on to antidepressants. Well, I'd seen that, and I was having none of it. But
Mhm.
he pointed us in the right direction of getting some professional help. There's a
Mhm.
group in this area called I Talk.
Mhm.
They they are psychologists and that sort of thing. I
Mhm.
went to see them. They didn't quite understand my problem, what what was what my issues.
Mhm.
So weren't really able to help me that much. I had half a dozen sessions, so thank you very much. I went and saw a couple of mates that I'd served with, and we put the old tin hat on, cracked a can open, swung the lamp, and thrashed it out, and got it put back in its box. And I've been okay ever since. But it's that's identifying that you've got a problem in the first place, and that you need some professional help.
Yeah.
And we've since that had happened, there's a new initiative that's gone on in this country, where we've got Op Courage, which is part of
Mm.
the National Health Service,
Yeah.
and there's another part to it that deals with the mental and physical side. So that is dedicated to veterans and for veteran support. So there is the opportunity out there. And what you must do is when you do transition out of the military, and when you register with your doctor and your dentist and stuff like that, let them know that you are a veteran, and
Right.
that puts a flag on you for when you do need that extra support that you don't get in civilian life.
Right. Yeah, it's when you're transitioning out, as you said, the civilian world is different. And here in the States, I work with a couple of organizations, and I sit on a board for an organization that talks about, and we try to help veterans think about their transition and think about where they might fit in their next job, because finding that fit is important. It's finding, we call it finding your tribe, because you want to, and many times you see veterans go to places where there's other veterans. That's certainly what my husband does. He left the Air Force. He retired from the Air Force, and he's a contractor, but he's a contractor with other veterans, because that's, you know,
Yes.
that's
So
that's the
so
company.
so so let's see. He got out of the military, got a job as a contractor back for the military, on
Right.
twice as much money that he was on doing the same job.
It, kind of close.
Kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yes.
I mean, so many guys are able to go down that, particularly the sort of if they come from the engineering background and stuff like that. They are able to get those jobs where they're doing the same job they were doing in the military, but for twice the money.
Yeah, that's him. So, but we have friends who have done the same thing, and really when I speak with these groups and talk with these women and men, that's what I tell them is like, look, first of all, the civilian world is different than what you're used to.
Mm,
And so you need to understand what you're walking into. But at the same time, you also want to know how you fit into their world, that because you are a veteran, you have served, and so that makes a difference. And in the United States, the Department of Veterans Affairs does provide medical service if a veteran has a certain rating, and things like that, for
mm.
disability and things like that. So there is like different care, because that's the other thing, like you said, is finding the right doctor and service to care for a veteran is very different than caring for someone who hasn't served,
Yeah,
right?
and
Understanding those
also
challenges.
civilians more often than not don't get military humour. They
Oh
don't
yeah,
get the military dark humour, and
yeah,
and that can lead to problems as well in the workplace.
it can, especially these
It's
days. It can.
especially in
Yeah,
this
it
woke
can.
world that we're in now.
Yeah, it can. And that was one of the things, as part of, I told you, that I wrote a book after I retired from the VA. Everybody told me I had to write a book, so I did. And the book is called Dare to Relate: Leading with a Fierce Heart. And it talks about my journey as a suicide loss survivor, as a military spouse, and the lessons I learned, and how that led me to lead with caring for my people first. And when you put your people and care for your people first, that's a different leadership style than we see in many, many organizations.
Mm,
And so when you have that connection, you understand and learn more about your people, and so you can support them, and especially with mental health. And so, I had people from the Gen Z generation all the way to boomers who worked for me. And what I've seen in the time that I've spent writing the book and listening and things like that is that there is a gap between leaders and employees, because the employees want that care and those relationships, and leaders are struggling to figure out how to provide those, because
mm,
it's not how they've been trained, and so they're trying to figure out how to do that. And so that's what the book is about, is really to kind of challenge leaders to think about, how they lead. And because sometimes when you walk into an organization that is struggling, whether it's, in my case, it was morale, it was results, it was all of it. Turning that organization around has to start with the people first. And
Yeah.
once you invest and care for the people, you bring tools and you listen and you support, then it starts to turn the organization around. Now, we went through the pandemic. I led through the pandemic, and unfortunately, during the pandemic, I did lose one of my employees to suicide, and it was completely unexpected. Even his family didn't
Yeah.
see it coming, and it was extremely hard. But the minute I found out, I was engaging with his coworkers and everybody who worked with him, and I brought in our team. We have a mental crisis team in the Department of Veterans Affairs who could help, and I brought them in immediately. But I was engaged with those employees who worked with that young man because I knew him too, and
Mm.
it was important because I had lived that, and so I knew what that looked like for them and how that impacted them. And it matters because it impacts your coworkers.
Yeah.
And it impacts people who know you, and even the family. I reached out to them and talked with them, and they wanted us to know at the organization how much he loved his work and how much the organization meant to him. And so that was really important to kind of bring that together and let people know.
Mm.
And I think leading through that is something that, again, leaders aren't trained classically to do. And they hand it over to human resources or someone else, and then the leader is seen as not caring or not being involved. And you
Mm.
can't, when you have that kind of situation, you very much have to be engaged and involved in the situation to help your
Absolutely.
people. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very much like it's a bit of trim, that trauma incident management
Hmm.
piece where
Yep.
where that somebody has done that and it affects so many people around them,
Yeah.
and a trim team comes in sort of 72 hours
Yeah.
after the incident, looks
Yeah.
at who's been involved, whether they're directly involved, indirectly involved, who's affected,
Hmm.
and then works out who's going to need professional help straight away, who's going to need an overall brief, who's going to
Yeah.
need whatever support.
Right.
And from that, the team is let people know that it's not unusual to have the feelings that they're going to be going through, the emotions they're going through. And
Yeah.
then they go back in at a 30-day point,
Mhm.
and if at any time during that period people are still struggling, they get reassessed,
Yeah.
then and pointed in the right direction to get some professional help. And then they go
Yeah.
back in at the 3 month point, just to see how people are getting on. And by that time, people should be dealing okay with it,
Hmm.
and that helps in the long run
Yes.
for dealing with complex PTSD further down the
Hmm.
line.
Yeah.
And
And
we're still seeing that sort of thing nowadays.
yeah. Yeah. And I think that will continue a little bit. But I think that program is very similar to what we had. I mean, they were in within 24 hours to talk to the team. They offered counseling, one-on-one group, follow up,
Mm.
and it was ongoing. And that's kind of the situation you have to know as a leader. You have to have those resources because, I was
Yeah,
lucky. I was at the Department of Veterans Affairs. We have those resources, right?
yeah,
But and sometimes in the corporate world, you have to make sure that you have those resources for your people to have and to lean on. And the other thing, one of the things I do talk about in the book, and I talk about when I speak, is you know we all have challenges and obstacles in our lives. That's what life seems to present those. And sometimes, if you're really dealing with what you feel is waves of them, they just keep buffering you. It's hard to look at that. And so talking with somebody else and learning and trying to figure out how you manage through that. Because what I have learned from my experiences is that many times those challenges can be catalysts to propel you forward into something that is better. It's a better purpose for you. It's a better direction for you. But you have to work through it, and you have to figure out how to do that. And I think for I don't know how Europe as much handled the pandemic as the United States did, but one of the things we learned in the United States is the importance of life as a whole over work. The United States, long time, work is, that's what you do, and life is part, No, we had turned that on its head. And so the pandemic taught us to turn that around. And so work is a part of life. It should enhance life, but it shouldn't dominate it. And I think
Yeah.
that's an important thing to remember for mental health as well, because a lot of people don't realize is your mental health sometimes governs your physical health more
Yeah.
so than you realize. And
I
so
think,
when you're in that situation, it can be hard.
yeah, I think you have to work to live, not live to work. And if you get
Exactly.
that balance right, then everything else can drop into place. But living to work is not the way forward.
Right. And your mental health piece, I mean, taking that time sometimes to walk away and go take a
Yeah,
walk or go enjoy, much like some of the pictures you were sharing, go enjoy,
yeah,
life, and go do things, take those breaks, because that's really important. I know even when I was writing the book, that's not my it's not my comfort zone. So I had to
no,
learn how to manage the stress around that, because it was very different than working full time as a CEO. And I would get into it and think, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know anything about this. And I knew that was my gremlins talking, but that's also knew that was time for me to step away and take a break
yeah.
from my
It's
mental health.
important. It's important to get that balance right.
Hmm.
I mean, the military drills it into you that work life, getting it right, and getting a job done, obviously. But
Yes.
there is time to step back, to take that
Yes.
condor moment to think, hang on, I need a break, and
Hmm.
it's important to get that. And if you don't, then it starts a spiral, and it gets into that pressured situation where you start getting out of your comfort zone, you start getting getting anxiety,
Hmm.
you start putting pressure on yourself when you no need to.
Right.
And I think that's important,
I
to
agree.
take that time, just to give yourself that condor moment and take a step back, take a breather, get some fresh air, and then get back into it.
Yeah.
So, where can people find your book?
Well, it's on Amazon. It's also on I think Kobo, which is one of the ones that I think Europe has access to. So it's on Kobo. It's on Amazon. It's on Ingram Spark. That's another location. So it's everywhere. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it's out. And I'm speaking. I'm actually launching the book tour next week. I start the first leg where I would be speaking from it, as well as signing copies while I'm out and about. So unfortunately, I'm not
Aha.
coming to England. I would if I could.
So, is the book in paperback and hardback? Is it available
Yes,
digitally?
it's on ebook, paperback, and hardback. I'm working on the audio version, but that probably will not be out until fall.
Wicked. Are you reading it yourself?
No, I'm going to have it narrated. I have a pretty good voice, but I also know enough to know that probably need to have somebody else read it.
Get a professional reader in.
That's right. Hmm.
Get a thespian to do it.
A thespian. That's right. A thespian. Yeah.
Terrific. Well, what I'll do is I'll put the notes in the description where you can find the book, and very, very best of luck with it.
Thank you. And people can always follow me on LinkedIn. I have a few connections in England, primarily around the mental health and suicide network that I know over there, and some military spouse, groups. So I'm on LinkedIn. It's Sherry with a C, Mason, very easy.
Terrific. I'll get that put in the description.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, there you go. We've had another terrific discussion around mental well-being, about suicide. And hopefully you can take from this that you're not alone. There is always somebody out there that you can talk to. And sometimes it can be a perfect stranger. Other times it can be your nearest and dearest. But the first thing to do is recognise that you're not right in yourself. You need some help. And once you go down take that first step, you'll be able to take the next step and the next step. Every journey starts with the first step. Just remember that. So until next week, when we hopefully have another guest on, take care, and TTFN, ta-ta for now. Oh, yeah, I'm back with this one again. I'll do it every week. so thanks for your time. TTFN. Ta-ta for now.